Star blessings. Let's talk about a couple of transits that are super, super important. I've touched on one of them briefly in a previous video, but I'd like to just expand a little bit more. And so what I'm referring to is the transit of, well, the Sun in Gemini. Just make a few comments about that, but I really want to focus on Pluto, Mars, and Jupiter. This very powerful T-square that's in alignment as we speak. And as I said in my previous video, it will actually be in play really for a couple of weeks. A very powerful trio, very powerful planets, extremely powerful. And I think more so because this is the first time for us in our lifetime seeing Pluto in Aquarius, and of course, the square to Jupiter and the opposition to Mars in Leo is a first encounter for us as well, simply because Pluto has not been in Aquarius in our lifetime. So these are really new energies, new portals from an evolutionary perspective, particularly. So the transit of Mars is really a powerful transit when you think about it from your own evolutionary position. And just your own evolutionary path and how you are growing and how you are actualizing, and how you are using your willpower, because the Mars-Pluto interface, those two energies really speak to the desires of the soul. The desires of the soul come from Pluto, and Mars is the one that really works in tandem, if you like, with Pluto in order to actualize the desires of the soul, being Pluto. Now, this is a collective transit, so everyone is experiencing it, and everyone will experience it differently depending on their circumstances. And then, of course, there is the collective energy of this as well. With Mars transits, here's something I'd just like to quickly read, and I'm going to read a couple of things today. So this is from one of Jeffrey Wolf Green's books, and he says the transit of Mars correlates to the leading edge of what the soul is currently desiring to focus on. Desires are a really great word for Pluto and for Mars, actually. Through Mars, we are always in a continuous state of becoming, a state of evolution. To continuously become means we are forever moving forward toward the future. To move toward the future implies a current moment and a past. Thus, the transit of Mars correlates to the leading edge of our ongoing evolution. Yet to move forward enforces the awareness of where we currently are and have been. In this way, we must confront whatever the existing circumstances are in our life, as well as the dynamics within us that in any way thwart, block, or stifle this necessary movement towards the future. That's just a small paragraph that I wanted to read, just to get us to reflect on the transit of Mars, because everyone is having the transit of Mars in Leo, and obviously everyone is having it at a different placement in their chart. For some people, it will be a Mars return because you've got Mars in Leo. And I think for those of you having a Mars return, this will be, a pretty important Mars return because of the aspect it makes to Pluto, which is the opposition. And you wouldn't have had this before in your lifetime. So it's a really, it's a really powerful portal and a new energy that you can work with from your own soul's evolution, really. So Mars-Pluto combinations are one of the most powerful combinations because they both speak to the will forces of the soul. And from an everyday, mundane personality level, if you like, these planets, particularly in an opposition, can speak to battles and conflict of will, power struggles, because with planets that are that are in opposition to each other, the tendency is to project the energy. The energy has to go somewhere. So it is either a process of conscious integration in order to use the willpower and the will forces in order to actualize the desires of the soul, depending on your own script, your own journey, where you are at the moment. And the other flip side to that coin is with no awareness and no understanding, very little consciousness, and just operating from a pure ego personality level. And the ego is very strong in Leo. We mustn't forget that. It's the personality completely actualized in Leo. So if the energy is not integrated, it can very easily be projected and produce conflicts and power struggles with a particular individual, or it could be with groups, because Pluto is in Aquarius, which is the archetype that corresponds to groups, communities, particular tribes. It could be humanity in general. You know, it just depends on the individual. So what is the intention here, and what is the benefit of this aspect? It's really about soul integration, to be able to express from your heart, Leo, but really having the awareness and understanding of others as well, Aquarius, and finding a way to balance and integrate those energies so that you don't lose your ability to speak from your heart, but also recognize that it is important to understand the differences in others, the differences in other people's beliefs, ethics, lifestyles, so on and so forth. So it's a tricky one, because we're talking about two planets of will that when Mars and Pluto are not integrated, the tendency is to produce some sort of battle or conflict, because it's well, Mars is the planet of the god of war. You know, it's the planet of fighting, conflict. It's the battle of defending oneself or defending for others and so forth. And so it's really about the awareness and the consciousness within the individual, and what are they fighting for. And the polarity of Leo Aquarius is really an integration point of understanding one's own personal heart space, Leo, the importance of that, but also being able to appreciate and understand the diversity of everybody else and the diversity that exists in this world, in different communities and so forth. It's a challenging access to a certain degree, but it's more challenging because of the planets involved here, which is Pluto and Mars. So depending on where this transit is occurring in your chart will depend on, you know, what areas of life it will speak to. For example, for me, this opposition is occurring right across my ascendant-descendant axis, because I have Aquarius rising and I have Leo on the descendant, and this transit is exactly on my ascendant-descendant, because my ascendant-descendant is 2 of Leo Aquarius. So I'll let you guys know what shows up for me. And obviously having it going across the ascendant-descendant really brings in the matter of self and other as well. So it's a very challenging aspect to have over your ascendant-descendant. So if you do have that, let me know. I'd be interested to hear what your experiences are. So Jupiter here being in the mix, forming a T-square to this opposition, really amplifies this opposition. Fortunately, it is Jupiter, and Jupiter is a benevolent planetary energy archetype. It inherently brings no harm, and in Taurus it does quite well. The energies here are really speaking to the deep desire to grow. Let me just read you a couple of keywords for Pluto Mars and Pluto Jupiter. So let's see. Pluto Mars, striving, hard work to contend against difficult odds, often successfully, brutality and conflict, ambition, ruthless drive, the desire to achieve one's objectives at all costs. So those are some key words that correspond to Pluto and Mars. And so you can see from that, just, at a really unconscious level, there can be tremendous battles in people's desires of expressing their will. It's a combative energy because it's polarized forces. There's a polarized energy here between Mars and Pluto because they are opposite each other. They're facing off, if you like. So it is important to think about the battles that you might be facing and how you will approach them, and bring some awareness into them. You do need to direct the energy as consciously as you can, because if you don't direct the energy, then you're going to project it, because the energy does need an outlet. And so the best course of action is to take the action that is necessary for you, obviously without trying to not project into conflict with it, as it were. It's very hard to do that, by the way, with Pluto Mars. So some keywords with Jupiter and Pluto: the drive to improve, the drive to grow in one's personal life, hence the drive for success and achievement. Also the danger of conflicts with people in power or with those who might feel threatened by one's achievement. So again, we can see here that there is an enormous desire for personal growth. Jupiter-Pluto energies, aspects, transits are one of the most powerful aspects for our own personal growth. It's amazing how people can grow with this energy. The will, the desires of the soul, the willpower is so extremely powerful, and Jupiter is just amplifying those desires, but in a way that speaks to the deep desire for personal growth and integration. And there's a real positive, sort of twist to it, because Jupiter is optimism, confidence, right? To accomplish or achieve or work through things that have often been more challenging or more difficult, or there's been roadblocks in the way. And Jupiter comes along here with this square to Pluto and really activates that drive and that desire with the energy of optimism and confidence to be able to do it. That's the power of this transit. So it produces a really strong level of confidence and faith to be able to do this. So these energies are wonderful, especially if we can bring, awareness into our life with how we are working with these energies. This opposition between Mars and Pluto, we can also think about it from the point of view of there was a conjunction between Mars and Pluto. The last conjunction they had was in Capricorn in February of 2022, so last year. So that was a new phase conjunction. And now we have reached the opposition, which is the full phase, which is the Libran phase. Phases are really important to consider when you are thinking about the aspects between planets, because an aspect between two planets had a birthing point. It had an inception point. It started somewhere. So this combination started in Capricorn when they were conjunct, as I said, in February of 2022. So it is useful to track back to that period in your life and think about what started at that time or what you intended to begin at that time. Because with a conjunction, you don't see the result. You simply plant the seeds, and you, over a period of time, you work towards that. You flower that garden so that it grows. And so at this point, over a year later, we're at the opposition point, which brings about awareness. It brings about the ability to see. Remember, this is the same energy as a full moon. What does a full moon do? It illuminates. It's going to illuminate whatever is there, for better or for worse. And even if it illuminates things that you are not comfortable with, or that you don't like, or that you're not happy about, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you have the awareness and you're able to see that now, so you can correct the course. You can take a different course of action. You can make different decisions. In a full moon phase, we can also begin new things as well. It's not often spoken about. It's more spoken about through a new moon, or a new phase of a conjunction of two planets. That's like the beginning. But at the full moon phase, why wouldn't you be able to start something new? Of course you can, because you now have the ability to see what's there. And so that can inform you of the decisions or actions you wish to take about any particular situation. In this case, it is very specifically connected to your desires, your personal desires, Mars, and how you can bring in the energies of Mars Pluto to help you actualize those desires, if they are, intended purely from a personal, self-centered, selfish position. You're likely to come up against opposition from Pluto, which will be a force outside of yourself, seen in another or in a group, that will come up against you. That's just the nature of an opposition, and especially with these archetypes in question, Leo and Aquarius. The other thing that I wanted to read, let me just find it. So the opposition, this is referring to a natal phase, right? If you were born with Mars opposite Pluto natally, but we can extend this to the transit somewhat. We can think about some of these key points relative to this transit from an evolutionary perspective. So at the evolutionary bridge, this is in relation to an opposition, okay? Mars opposite Pluto. At the evolutionary bridge and juncture, the individual meaning given to the original evolutionary intent must now be given social meaning. It must be related to and shared with others. And I think the statement that he just made is even more compounded by the fact that Pluto is in Aquarius here. This aspect produces the necessity to give the original evolutionary purpose a socialized context or framework to operate through, so that the individual can continue the ongoing evolutionary development initiated at the new phase conjunction, which is what I was just saying a moment ago when I said in February of 2022, Mars and Pluto were conjunct as a collective transit. However, that transit would have been somewhere in your chart, wherever Capricorn is. And so that was the birthing of that Pluto-Mars aspect, that Pluto-Mars energy. in order to do so, the individual must enter into social relationships, revealing that he or she is an equal among others. The individual must learn to listen to others through relationships in order to evaluate his or her own individuality, and must learn how to relate or apply the evolutionary purpose in a way that is needed by others. Again, I feel these statements here are really relevant because of Mars being in Leo and Pluto being in Aquarius, because the polarity of Leo Aquarius is the recognition of one's personality, self-actualization, fully developed into knowing, seeing, shining yourself, who you actually are, your talents, your gifts, heart-centered energy, but not losing sight of the fact that there are many other people on the planet, Aquarius, and everyone has something different to bring to the table. That's kind of like one of the evolutionary integration journeys, if you like, of Leo Aquarius. It's the realization of self and also being able to see the diversity and recognizing that whilst you are important, Leo, so is everybody else, Aquarius. He says, nevertheless, the opposition often produces a potential confrontation of will and clashing desires. And that's exactly right. And that's what I was talking about when I was saying before that with the Mars-Pluto opposition, the energy has to go somewhere. And if it is not integrated consciously, it will produce those clashes and conflicts, because the Pluto will be projected outside of yourself onto a community, a group of people, and so forth. Because the individual may feel that their personal power, which is Mars, or sense of personal identity, again, that's Mars in Leo, is being absorbed and lost through the necessity to interact with others. They may have a sense of losing control of their personal identity and the power to shape that destiny from a strictly egocentric point of view. That's very much Mars in Leo. The individual may choose to resist the necessity of developing and expanding social awareness and of being pulled out of self-oriented narcissistic world by attempting to dominate others through strength of will, to shove their personal purpose down the throats of others in order to feel powerful and secure. We can see that playing out through Mars in Leo opposite Pluto and Aquarius very easily in many individuals. I can see that. So if I think about political arenas, people in position of power being opposed by the people, Aquarius, especially with the narrative that's been playing out the last 3 years, which is still a mess. It still hasn't cleared up. There's still so much force and push for control and for disempowering people. Just think about the cost of living. I don't know what it's like with the rest of the world, but I'm sure there's similar things going on. In Australia, the cost of living is astronomical. Most people, even people who are, employed and, getting a reasonable salary, they too are struggling, especially if they have, a family with children and so forth. The cost of living here is just absolutely psychotic. Most people are really not able to meet the demand. Everything's gone. I mean, everything has gone up in price in ways that cannot be justified at all. So the imbalance and the injustice and the squeeze that's going on, like the pressure that people are facing because of these unjust systems, is astronomical. It's got to reach a breaking point, though. It's just really out of control. So, Pluto in Aquarius is the people. It really is the people. And we're going to see, an incredible evolutionary shift over the next 20 years, but it's going to be 20 years, right? So it's a slow process. We're not going to see things change overnight. And at the moment, the focus is all on AI and the dangers of that. And everything has got a flip side. Everything has a shadow, right? So Pluto in Aquarius, of course, is going to bring those dark, if you like, shades or shadows of communities and groups, religious or otherwise, that are completely dodgy, that will be just completely exposed in a different way to Pluto having exposed the Capricorn structures of this 3D reality. Now in Aquarius, it's going to expose things on another level. And the AI, it's taking off like there's no tomorrow. It's just speeding up really quickly, infiltrating itself into this third dimension reality, for better or for worse. And there's going to be a lot of people that are going to misuse that technology. There's no question about it. So, we're contending with a lot of those issues at the moment as well. And just on the one hand, the AI, as far as I am concerned, it does take us further and further away from the soul, right? And that's a problem. That's always been a problem. The ego, in that the ego is important, and there's inherently nothing wrong with it. Let me just be clear on that. But the imbalance of the ego and the moving further and further away from soul, that's what the problem is. So we'll see, because there's going to be a lot of problems. I mean, there's things already going on where with AI you can record somebody else's voice and get them to say whatever you want. Now that's pretty dangerous, right? Because imagine how many people are going to take advantage of that, and imagine the amount of dishonesty that will go on with that. People will be thinking that that person said XYZ when in fact they didn't. It's just been an AI creation. So yeah, we're going to be looking at some really interesting things moving forward. Okay, let me just see if there was anything else here. So yeah, look, essentially Pluto Mars, it is, at a more conscious evolutionary level, it is about lower will, Mars, highest will, Pluto, soul, integration, right? Conscious integration and embodiment to align the will forces. Remember, in evolutionary astrology, Jeffrey Wolf Green talks about the soul's desires, and he uses the term separating desires, and there's nothing wrong with those. Those separating desires are the very things that enact the experiences that we have, the choices that we make. But the more separating desires we have, the further we move away from the soul and source. The more we eliminate those separating desires, and they all come from Mars, these separating desires. The more we eliminate them, the more we integrate with Pluto, soul, and where's Neptune? And source. Because the ultimate the ultimate desire for the soul is to return back to its source, but it has to have the experiences, which are countless experiences over countless lifetimes. It's, well, I mean, essentially, we are all a spark of source. We are source itself experiencing through this physical dimension. We are source expressing through source, as it were, in these physical bodies. Source is experiencing through us, in other words, if you can understand that. So Mars Pluto, whatever aspect is in your chart with Mars Pluto is extremely important, because that's going to describe a particular phase between Mars and Pluto, and that speaks to very specific evolutionary intentions, desires, and journeys relative to where the soul is at. And even though that's a natal description, we can think about the Mars-Pluto transits in a similar way, because they are just mirroring the same energy, just perhaps through different houses, different signs, and at different junctures and points in our life. But the point is, it's the same energy, it's the same planets, so we can think about the integration of these energies from the point of view of evolving ourselves, simply put. What else did I want to say? Yeah, Sun in Gemini, that's happened just in the last sort of few hours, if you like. And so Gemini season begins. Gemini season is always very interesting. It highlights Mercury, Hermes, the trickster, the one that connects all the dots. It stimulates curiosity, learning, communication, networking, ideas, communication with different groups of people, individuals, teaching, speaking, all the things that Gemini and Mercury correspond to. So there's a lot of mental stimulation when the Gemini archetypes start to kick in. And this one's very different and very special, because as soon as the sun went into Gemini, it formed a trine to Pluto immediately. And we've not had that before in our lifetime. So this Gemini solar season is going to be very different because of the trine to Pluto. And thank God it's a trine aspect, because Pluto in the everyday personality, mundane world, is a very, it can be a very heavy, very intense energy. And if it's in a hard aspect, it can be, it's so dynamic and can be so difficult to manage. But, in a trine aspect, there's an indication or an implication that there's an evolutionary portal collectively for all of us between the sun and Pluto in air signs. So the integration here is from the air element, if you like, which again is about communication, ideas, learning, teaching, speaking, reading, writing, networking, and so forth. So there's a transformative quality about this energy from the point of view of our mind, transforming our ideas, our perceptions, our thoughts. And it's a beautiful thing here, because Gemini on its own, whilst it can be brilliant from an intelligent, intellectual perspective, it can get very caught up in the aspect of life that is black and white. So Gemini gets caught up in the world of opposites. It gets caught up in, my idea is right, so your idea's got to be wrong. Very black and white it can be, because it gets caught up in the world of opposites. It's the first encounter of the world of opposites, if you like, relative to the natural order of the zodiac. It's the first air sign. So that's why Gemini is the most curious sign of all. It's the first air sign. So it's the first encounter with the mind and the ideas. And there's so many ideas and there's so many things to think about. There's so many things to learn. There's so much interest, right? So Pluto forming the trine really helps us channel that energy to transform perhaps the more dualistic nature of Gemini, and the fact that it has that side to it where it can be so black and white in its thinking. Pluto helps us expand, right, and transform our ability to perceive and just transform the way we think about things. And Aquarius, you know, is an archetype that speaks to the bigger picture. You know, it's a sign that is more connected to transcendent energies, you could say. That the last signs of the zodiac have a transpersonal quality or component to them. They think more broadly. They can see the bigger picture. So I really love this energy between Pluto trine the sun, just from the point of view of our own personal growth and evolution. Again, the ability to transform our limited mindsets and see the bigger picture, Aquarius, and the bigger picture for the purposes of humanity, Aquarius, and the transformation, Pluto, of humanity into a more just and fair and equal playing field, Aquarius. Because let's face it, there's huge imbalances and injustices that have gone on far too long. And let's not forget the Venus Libran star point that happened October last year, which is an ingression that started October last year and goes for the next 100 years. So we're seeing, you know, these are long evolutionary cycles, but they are they're powerful, and they bring in a lot of hope as well, particularly Venus in Libra, her rulership position, speaking to balance and harmony and peace. We just need to be patient, because these large evolutionary cycles, you know, things don't change overnight, but they are encouraging when we can be aware of the potential of what they're going to bring, and align ourselves with that potential, with the promise of what those archetypes speak to, so that we can integrate with those pathways. And that means having consciousness, awareness, and not being self-absorbed. Because if we are self-absorbed, then we're just seeing it from our own narrow personal perspective and our own suffering, and we don't care about or don't see the bigger picture. We're just wrapped up in our own personal stuff, and we're just one speckle in this infinite journey, life experience, universe, galaxies, stars, planets. There's so much, and we're just one small part of it. But that's not to diminish the importance that we each have, because even though we are a small part, every single part is contributing to the whole, and every single part is extremely important. And the radiance of the soul expressing through every life, through this body, has a very important purpose, desire, intention, and place in this world. Every single soul, doesn't matter who they are. So when we think about bigger picture things, it's more inspiring, I feel, that's for sure. So yes, we're looking at a Gemini season with the influence of Pluto in a harmonious way, because it's a trine aspect, really helping the evolution on the planet, transitional journeys in a way that are fluid, non-resistant. Trines don't produce resistance. They produce a natural transition. In this case, it's a natural transformative transition into the experience, or just in how our mind perceives and how we are learning and what we are communicating and so forth. So that's really all I wanted to speak to for today. I'll be back with more soon. Let me think, was there anything else that I wanted to point to? No, I think perhaps the next video, or this was an audio today because I just felt like speaking and not being seen. Being seen is a lot more challenging. Those of you that don't do videos wouldn't understand that, but those of you that do perhaps would understand. Just takes a lot of energy to put these together and to communicate them and share them, and yeah, so anyway, and I've got some health matters that I'm still contending with. So oh, well, I've had Mars transiting my 6th house, so that's yeah, that's been an interesting little journey. It's moved out of my 6th now, so I'm kind of happy about that. I think the next video I'll do will be the Venus retrograde, which is the new morning star. Venus retrograde in Leo, new morning star. That's going to be extremely powerful for so many different reasons, which I'll come back and talk about. But see, Mars in Leo is going to catch up to Venus in Leo. So we will see a Venus-Mars conjunction. Anyway, I've got a lot to share about that, and there might be other things I just can't think at the moment. Any case, I'll see you guys soon. Thanks for listening, and yeah, feel free to share your stories and comments and questions. Much love and many star blessings. Bye for now.